Up here at San Anton Bay, man, we've been working a lot of the reefs still. We've had a pretty busy rainy week this past week. Temperatures in very comfortable range. Water temps have followed suit. They've been in that same area. Fish are still holding on these reefs. That type of area. Hard packed sand and grass. But we were just primarily kind of focused up here in San Anton Bay, Chicken Foot area, even further back down toward Bayside and that area back over in there with all the reefs that are out here in San Antonio Bay. If you haven't fished San Antonio Bay, be careful as you kind of move around there. Our water levels have been on the lower side here the last several days, starting to come back a little bit. But what we've done is, we just kind of work these particular areas, get on those reefs, and once you kind of locate them, then depending on your GPS system, if you got a Garmin or Simrad or one of those that's got the overlay on it, then you can see that with that Google Earth overlay. So they're very distinct when you get into those areas. So you just kind of proceed cautiously. But it's a terrific area, man. You got lots of opportunity to fish. There's lots of reefs that's up there in the San Antonio Bay area. So if you're not locating on one particular reef, you just kind of slide down a little bit. There's a couple of these that are several hundred feet long, several hundred yards long. A couple of them are, close to a half a mile long, depending on where you're at. But you can get on these things. Now they're not particularly wide, so if you're trying to put, more than 3 or 4 people on a couple of these reefs, you're not going to be able to fish it because there's different sides to these reefs. Some of them have got just a drop edge where you're standing on top of it ankle deep, and then you step off on one side of it, and then you'll be belly deep, and it gets a little bit deeper pretty quick. Then you have a more gradual side on that other side of it, so that's where you could probably put a few more people if that's what you so choose to do. But like I say, just work these reefs up and down wherever you're kind of what your wind is doing. We've had pretty low wind concentration this past week, other than when little pop-up storms happen and you get that wind that comes out of those. But we've worked them and had relatively good success there. Found decent fish, found a lot of fish on a few of these reefs. A lot of the trout, that's primarily what we've been focusing on, is trout, not so much redfish. And we've had good success with that. Main baits that we have been using, I've been using the down south version in both the original, the supermodel, and the burner shad size. Those flavors that have been pretty good has been bone diamond and white ice, kind of based on what our water clarity's been. So those two flavors right there have been really good for us. Some of the water that we've found is a little bit cleaner. We've been using the firecracker, mud minnow, supernatural in the burner shad. Again, white ice in the original. Supermodel's been the same thing. Texas roach has kind of made its way back into there a little bit. Hadn't thrown that in quite a while, but we had some of those, put it on there. Of course, watermelon red's been good for us in those particular flavors. Big Papa, Twisted Tea. Twisted Tea's been pretty good flavor as well, especially in the bigger version. We're in that transition mode headed toward that new moon that's coming up, getting a little bit more water back, so there should be some good opportunities here over the next 10, 12 days. Just kind of depending on what our weather patterns do, if we're going to continue to stay in this rainy pattern, which has been good for our bay system. It goes a long way in keeping that salinity level normalized and equaled out. So always a good thing when we can get some fresh water into our system gradually like we've had in this past week. But something to be aware of and just take consideration when you have a trip that's coming up or in the future, whatever it is. Always keep an eyeball on that weather and see what's going on with it. But back to the baits and the flavors, we've on the knock and tail as well. They've come out with one. It's Morning Glory. It's type of flavor. It's kind of a purplish, clearish bait. And so in that cleaner water, we've done that. And it's done pretty well for us. We're working these edges up here on the hard packed shoreline here off the point. We haven't gotten into Mustang Lake or any of that, so we've just kind of hung out around those particular areas there, just working grass lines, working the shell, working that. Mirror Lure Little Johns have always been good. Watermelon Red's been pretty good for us. The Golden Red Glitter have been, those two primary flavors have been good. Some of the the Marker 54, the jerk shrimp, and their paddle tail have been good. So if you haven't tried the new Marker 54 paddle tail, pick you up some of that at your local tackle store. If you're around the Rockport area, Rockport Tackle Town has all the stuff that you need there. Or if you're over in Corpus, you got Roy's, it's over there as well. So any of those places will have that kind of stuff for you. So if you don't have it, you have an opportunity to pick that up before your next opportunity to be on the water. Again, Majors and minors have been the main key for us that we have been locating and finding fish. We have struggled a little bit in between those bite frames, so you just have to get after it and just fish, man. Find the pattern that these fish are on and what they're doing, paying attention to what that is. Again, we've primarily focused on the shell bars, shell reef, shell pads, and it's produced for us consistently. So that's going to be the continual key for us. Then, of course, when we've gotten into some areas that's got deeper grass beds as that sun gets up, because, we're fixing to, as we are here at the end of July, and we're going to head into August, those temperatures more than likely are going to rise up, and they're going to be even more hot. So it's something to just be aware of and how your pattern is going to be, because this summertime pattern is going to stick around probably for another month or two at least. Just so kind of work that pattern the best you can. Kind of ever so often you work a little bit deeper guts and some edges and something like that to kind of just sprinkle that in there with you just to see if there's some fish that are holding in those types of areas. But this has been the pattern that we've worked, and that's what's been working for us. So we will continue to follow that trend. From the from the Allen's Bight area, all this St. Joe shoreline. We've been working all this out here. This is one of the areas where you've got your deeper grass beds that's been pretty productive for us this past week as well. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on weather-wise. We had a bunch of these pop-up storms that's been happening all week long. You kind of duck and dodge a little bit here and there. So you have to kind of be careful of that. And if you have the opportunity to get on some of these areas like that, and you can do it safely without having to worry about it, then this is where you go. Of course, you can do a couple of things. You can run from it if you don't want to contend with it, or you just kind of hunker down and just ride it out until you get the hour until it passes by. Because they haven't been to a point where they're just staying on top of us. So a lot of this stuff is moving pretty quickly, so it comes and goes. But we've had pretty good days out here on the front. Let's say the one thing to keep in mind is we've been working the shell a lot early in that cooler water, and then of course as that sun begins to rise, then that water heats up, especially shallow. So this is where you kind of maybe want to target these deeper grass beds a little later in the morning, and you can also target them during the early morning hours if you so choose. That's been our pattern, and what we've done it's been pretty productive for us, and we've stuck with that. But also what we've done is, as we've moved out to deeper water, as that sun heats up the water, those fish are moving out there over those deeper grass beds. That's where you've got, some more crustaceous that's in there. You got some little small crab, little shrimp that's in there, maybe even some little bait fish that's swimming in around that deeper grass. So those fish have an opportunity to feed, even though they're coming off night feeds as it is, but then they can stay out there and stay in that cooler water and be comfortable and then eat as they so choose. So it's been a really good opportunity for us to locate fish later in the morning and maybe early afternoon. It's been pretty good as well. But the one thing that you have to understand, there's going to be lulls in your catching day. So we've just kind of scratched out those areas, and if we've left those types of areas, then the next location that we're going to go to is going to be very similar to that same setup, so we can continue that, because those fish will patternize for you, and they will stick to that. So just something to keep in mind when you're starting to work a different area like that. If you're going to move off of that deeper grass and go to another area that's got some deeper grass, you may have some fish that are holding there, as opposed to these, it's either moved off a little deeper or have moved on one way or another. But anyhow, pretty much just in the last video, what I'd mentioned, the same baits and flavors we've been throwing out in this deeper water. We've even sprinkled in a bit of the Big Smooth from down south. Of course, we've thrown some of the Supermodel, but we've primarily been throwing the original and burner shad coming off of that the full moon into the transition days. I always like to stick with a little bit smaller profile bait until something dictates otherwise for us to move up in size and profile. Those flavors, Twisted Tea, Big Papa, White Ice, Bone Diamond, those 4 flavors right there have been pretty consistent for us in no matter what size. Of course, if the water's been a little bit cleaner, we've thrown a little bit more translucent bait, kind of like the Supernatural, Firecracker, Mud Minnow have been pretty good for us. And then, of course, the Little John, both in the Little John and the Little John XL, in the Golden Red Glitter has been pretty good. Of course, Watermelon Red's a really good one. Purple Demon has been pretty good. All have caught fish. Some a little bit more than others, but there's nothing that's been like super consistent with one particular flavor or the other. So you have a variety of things that you can throw in there. Size-wise, of course, and then Knock and Tail, we have the Greenback, the Heavy Metal, and the Rogue flavor. Of course, the one thing about the Heavy Metal and the Greenback, those flavors have been pretty good. A little bit, actually produced a little bit better than what the Rogue flavor has, so we've kind of stuck more with that. And then, of course, I mentioned the Little John. Soft dine, we have not thrown any this past week. We have sprinkled in a couple of guys had thrown the double D in there, and it did okay. So it just kind of depend on the water and where we're at and what we're working. But we're working shallow early, and as that sun begins to rise, then we start sliding off to a little bit deeper water. We're throwing out there into that 3 to 5 foot of water out there. If you want to change your jig head out to an 1/8 ounce, that's fine. You can control that descent in that deeper water like that. So, and it might be a little bit better setup for you if you don't want to throw the 1/16 ounce. You have to keep everything a little bit more consistent when you throw into deeper water with the 1/16 ounce jig head. It just takes a little bit longer, and you have to be a little bit more patient. If you don't have the ability to do that or not used to doing that technique wise, and just put a little bit heavier jig head on there, and that'll help you out. But again, majors and minors have always produced and continue to produce for us, and we're just scratching out fish in between those. Keep an eye on what your weather pattern is in this upcoming week, so don't get yourself caught in a little bit of jeopardy. Over here is St. Charles Bay. You got the East Pocket area, you got Bird Point, all the way around the shoreline that goes all the way up to Egg Point, all the way back to Big and Little Sharp. You've got Boy Scout Camp shoreline. All those areas back in there have been pretty good. We've been working also on the Cow Chip side, that shoreline that's on that side just down from Big and Little Sharp, and of course Cavasso Creek. All those areas have been pretty good for us. Nothing that's just been overwhelmingly good, but been consistent. Primarily trout in these areas. We've pulled out a few redfish that are up and down the shoreline. Again, we've had lower tides this past week, and then of course with all the pop-up rains and stuff, this particular area over here from Goose Island all the way back to the St. Charles Bay system, it's been hammered pretty good this past week as far as the rain goes. So we've kind of had to choose what day we've kind of slid in there and just kind of looked and see everything going, paid a lot of attention to what the radar did, so we could kind of get ourselves out of a little bit of a trouble. Again, we're working these harder packed sand, we're working the grass, working shorelines, and that's where we're finding the fish. There's areas that's holding a little bit more better fish than others, but trout have been pretty good in there, anywhere from 13 to 17 inches. The restricted slot, that 20 to 30 inch, we haven't found hardly anything in that size frame. Everything's been in the new slot size for us in that 15 to 20. And of course the redfish have been scattered, been pretty good for the most part, catching those. And just working, there's a few areas that's got shell. Most of the shell in St. Charles is all going to be up in the front, where you either go through the main cut up there off Blackjack Point, East Pocket area. You got lots of shell that's in there, and that's there's fish that are scattered about that. So just be careful when you're working through, especially when that tide's pulling in or pushing out. Then you got a pretty good amount of current that runs through those little fingers that are there as well. So just something to be aware of. But we've been primarily just staying over the hard packed sand and grass all in these back areas back here, and just working those. Again, same flavors in the down south, the Twisted Tea. We noticed in this particular areas back here, and it's been a little bit not as clean as some of the areas that's been in our estuaries, but it's been just a little more stained. So we've thrown more of our the Bone Diamond's been good in that particular thing, like Twisted Tea, Big Papa. Those flavors have been pretty good for consistency goes. And of course, the Watermelon Red and the Little John and the XL have been good. They've produced fish for us. We've thrown a little bit of the Double D back in here and had a decent amount of success with it, especially working this shoreline right here, also Ernest Point, all back around that, because you got a nice hard packed shore that's on that goes all the way back to where the oyster bars are, and working some of that area. Of course, in the knock and tail, the heavy metal and the greenback have been very good for us. Rogue has been okay, not super great, but those particular flavors in general that we're just talking about have been the most productive for us. Now, if there's other flavors that you want to chunk in there, it's kind of along the same color pattern, do it. Try it and see what's happening. You never know. So, haven't thrown hardly any topwater baits and had very little success with that, so I haven't stuck with it very long at all. So we're just primarily working our plastics and a little bit more harder suspended baits with that, like the Mirror Lure or the Double D. But anyhow, working these areas with those particular baits, focusing on our majors and minors primarily, and then just kind of working a little bit deeper edges in some of the areas back in St. Charles and seeing what's going on. A few fish hanging in Cavasso. Some are hanging out on Boy Scout. And, of course, egg is all that's been good. So there's plenty of shoreline to work. Just find your bait. See what you got going on. Just kind of let the fish dictate to you. Again, we're in those transition days, so make sure that you have different profile sizes in your box so you can see kind of what they want, if they want something smaller, something bigger, or maybe medium size, whatever that may be. So the fish will dictate to you what they want. Just pay attention to it. But as this upcoming week comes, hope everybody gets an opportunity to get out on the water and enjoy yourself, but more than anything, be safe.